This is episode 11, recorded on May 12th, 2021. My guest today is Nick Tarascio, the CEO of Ventura Air, an airline with a strong and successful focus in private charter, aircraft management, sales, and organ and medical transport. Wondering why he's on the podcast? Well, like all of us, Nick is a spiritual seeker and a meditator. We talk about dealing with fear in the cockpit and how that translates to everyday life. It's Not What You Think podcast is available on all streaming platforms, so please like, comment, share, or subscribe on your favorite platform. That support is enough to continue to allow us to produce this show. Our interviews are with people who may have opinions different from yours or mine, so while we keep an open mind, just remember, it's not what you think. After all the texts and the emails and the talks, I'm finally get a chance to meet you in person.
Yeah, it's nice to see you.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. Coming out of a challenging conversation, more humility from all levels, I guess.
So I read an article. This is part of the podcast, by the way, even though we didn't do the introduction, but we already started. I read an article this week about a 10-year-old boy, I think it was in the New York Times, homeless, had been homeless for a few years. And he just became a chess, I forget what it's called, national grandmaster. I don't know all the titles, but the kid's 10 years old. And so it's a great article if you read it. And the family came over from either Kenya or Nigeria, and it's one of those difficult stories. And at the end of the article, the author, I want to say Nicholas Kristof from the New York Times, said to him, how is it? How do you do when you lose? He goes, oh, he did a better job in paraphrasing it than I did. It's something like, I don't lose, I learn. I'm a 10-year-old kid, it's just great. I don't lose, I learn, something like that. So that was amazing.
Yeah.
Anyways, so sorry to hear that you had a difficult conversation, but hey, you never know what happens from stuff like that. You know the Zen story about the Zen master farmer. Good
Yeah,
luck,
with the
bad luck,
horse.
maybe.
Yeah, with the horse who jumps in his yard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good luck, you just don't know.
Yeah.
Good luck, bad luck, maybe. Anyway, so as you know, you were referred to me on the podcast by a mutual friend of ours, Jack. And initially, I was hesitant because although your background as a CEO of Venture Air was impressive, I didn't see the connection between what you're doing and the show, which is really about learning about the lives of spiritual teachers and seekers and see how they get through life and all that. So I didn't see the connection. But then I watched a bunch of interviews that you had done, and you were talking quite a bit about fear and your approach to it. And that's when I got hooked. I said, okay, because I'm my background is, karate for 40 years and a lot of rock climbing. So there's a lot of fear going on, and so I've studied it quite a bit. And of course, I'm still a tiny beginner in that world, but that really hooked me as well. So before we talk about, but that's how, got interested and I'm grateful that you're on the show. But before we talk about fear, I read that you meditate. So how did you discover meditation, and do you do it regularly or just, when you need it? What's your background there in the world of meditation?
So I connected with a community called Summit Series, I think back in 2008 or 2009, and there was just a lot of people like the Tim Ferriss crowd, a lot of that stuff where they would talk about kind of these incredible life hacks for productivity. And, as a CEO, it was like, oh, that speaks my language. Um, so I think it was just more of like seeing people doing it. And it was just a whole community of people I was around were into alternative ways of doing things at the time, which I think meditation was a little less popular in the American lexicon at the time. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, so I've just kind of always been around it, and then started to practice it myself, tried all different types of stuff, TM, mindfulness, and then realized that I actually met a guy really interesting. He's a former Navy SEAL that teaches people open eye meditation, and where you're kind of looking at a point on the wall and then expanding to the like max
Sure.
periphery.
Sure.
And just the more I looked at it, the more I was like, I don't even have to do these practices, because for me, walking can be meditation, playing music can be meditation, flying an airplane really is meditation on many different levels. So I started to see more and more that I could make space for meditation, or even convert some of my existing activities into a meditative type practice.
Well, that's beautiful, and that's dead on because the initial, like you said, 20, 30 years ago, when people thought meditation, that was like, okay, you're on your cushion or whatever, you're doing something, your eyes are closed or open or whatever, you're breathing. But what about the other 23 and a half hours in the day?
Yeah.
It's like, well, the whole idea when you meet these great meditators or great saints or Buddhists or, mystics in Judaism or Christianity or Hinduism, and they're really in a meditative state 24/7. Literally, even while they're sleeping, they are aware, lucid dreaming, if anyone is familiar with that. And so that's kind of, I hate to use the word goal, but that's really what we try to do as meditators is meditating on the cushion, half hour a day, once or twice a day. That's great. But then you want to keep that level of awareness and sensitivity to your thoughts as you go about the day. So there's, Zen meditation has walking meditation, which is very, I don't want to say popular, but it's the same thing, just being
Yeah.
aware. So I'm thrilled. And I think out of everyone that I've had on the podcast, which is a lot of meditation teachers, you're the only one that has brought up this whole concept, which of course is, hey, what about the rest of the day? And when you're flying, and I would think more, it's probably true if you're flying a 747 or even a small jet, but I think when you're in the small planes, you really have to be aware of what's going on. On the big planes, you got a co-pilot, an engineer, or this or that. Let me go get some coffee. I'll go to the bathroom. But I would think the level of awareness is greater on the smaller flights or the smaller planes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, generally speaking, I would say without realizing it, we were basically taught a stoic practice, which is how do you say it? It's memento mori, I believe, meditating on your own death when you wake up.
Ah, got it.
So
Okay.
again, it's so funny to see that like that wasn't the intention. They're literally telling you like, look, you're a single engine airplane. If your engine quits, you always need to be looking for a place to land the airplane. You always need to have a sense of like maybe there's a school field or a backyard or a road I can land it on. So in many ways, you're spending all this time thinking about this horrible event. And like, well, I guess I could die if that happened. I mean, unlikely, but still, it's something that I have to consider. So it's like understanding at 16 years old when I flew my first airplane by myself, it was awareness of my mortality. And that was a gift in many ways, but I didn't realize it. And then sitting in an airplane and looking at like, let me think of everything that could possibly go wrong. And let me also try to take in the beauty of what I'm doing, because I don't want it to just be all anxiety the whole time. So it really was that, like when I talk about the pilot mindset, in many ways, I did not realize it is in some ways a spiritual practice. And it's just many of us don't connect the dots on that it teaches you how to see the world in a certain way that I think many meditators are trying to get people to see as well.
Well, also, you're very lucky, I think, because at the age of 16, you're very impressionable. So you really took that lesson, that experience to heart. If you're 42 or 38 or you're first starting to learn something like that, it's a little bit harder because we're very concretized in our being and how we view the world. So anyway, so I'm thrilled. I didn't realize that you took it to that. I don't want to say to that degree because it sounds like it's extreme, but you took it that way because that's really where we want to be. We want to be meditating now. I want to be aware now. And if I'm not, then what am I doing? Well, I'm probably telling myself stories about what I should be doing, could have, would have, should have, the past, the future, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us to the next question is, can you elaborate on your experience with fear, and how, because I watched some of the videos, but you'll do a better job talking about it from your perspective than I can.
Sure. So fear, I mean, I carry a lot of anxiety. I don't know exactly where it came from. Again, that's a lot of questions about nature versus nurture and who we actually are. And
We're going to fix that now, by the way. We're going
yeah,
to take care of that now. We're going to answer that question, where it came from. So I'm joking. Go ahead.
great. Great. I could definitely use that. I'll
Take care
send you
of
money
that.
later. So growing up in a way that I think I was always afraid of everything going wrong. So I had health issues as a kid. I was bullied. I had social anxiety. I had stage fright. When I look at like all the things that were basically these massive walls holding me back, I think if I had just taken them at face value and decided to build my life around the fears, I think I would have had an incredibly mediocre life. I would have not done anything on stage. I would have not put myself in social situations. I wouldn't have traveled. I wouldn't go on roller coasters. There's a lot of things I wouldn't do. I definitely wouldn't run a business because this is insane when you talk about fear. Um, the funny thing is that some part of me, and I do think this is where a therapist once told me I'm a counterphobic. Maybe that's the superpower and the gift that I was given, was that when other people see fear and then run away from it, like a normal healthy phobia, I see fear and I run at it to try to assert control and dominance over it. So the things that have become the greatest gifts in my life, and again, this is like more stoicism, or like Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle's the Way. Ultimately, my stage fright became one of my greatest gifts, is that now I perform all the time on stage, and my social anxiety became, I'm like a hyper networker, and my fear of roller coasters turned into I became a stunt pilot. And so like on and on and on, all the things that I was most afraid of ultimately became the things that were the gift. And it was the leaning through the fear and realizing like that was the a friend of mine is he's Indian. He talks about there's an expression there about like to purify the gold, it has to go through the fire.
Mm.
And I don't actually know what the expression is, but it's something I'm kind of paraphrasing it. But in many ways, I'd say that those were my trials by fire. It was like to go through and lean into my fear and come out the other side with the confidence that fear won't stop me, that I'm refined, I'm polished, I have these new skills that ultimately have become something that there are people that probably don't have stage fright and they like, performing's fun. No, I had to work for it. I earned it. When I get up on stage, I'm reminded every time I had to work really hard to get there. When I am at a social event, some people are like, friends are nice. I'm like, you have no idea how much friends mean to me and networks mean to me, because I have to work at it. I had to learn it. I had to study it. How do you connect with people? How do you read social cues? Like I was so like low EQ. It's insane. So I think that there's something like that is the gift, is I appreciate things in a way that other people might just take for granted.
Yeah. So you and I had, I didn't realize it, of course, you and I had very similar experiences growing up. And, and I call it, I grew up in a box. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it until I started to see light and opening the box and being able to get out of it. But, the box of fear and anxiety and all that. Once again, nature, nurture, we can talk about that till the cows come home. And one of my ways out of the box was through a lot of martial arts and a lot of rock climbing. And what I learned was something what you learned, which is, and the expression you used, lean into it, is actually a very popular expression. You probably didn't realize this in Buddhism, which is when there's something uncomfortable, instead of hiding, suppressing, ignoring, whatever, we lean into it to feel what it's going on. And because once you do that in 99 out of 100 cases, you'll see that it's ephemeral. It's going to pass. And number two, you'll see that, you can feel better and you start to learn from it, and et cetera, et cetera. And you break the habit of just, you break that habit, which is, so we got triggered. But the part that really resonates with me is that, so I used to have to go to karate class every single, whatever it was, 3, 4 times a week. I used to have to go climbing. And every single time I went, I'd have this incredible anxiety and fear. And I went and I overcame it, overcame it. And I did that for a long time, 40 years. And at some point, usually really the last 5 or so years, I realized, well, I've created my own treadmill now. I'm now my own hamster on my own treadmill. How do I get off that? How do I stop saying, oh, I have to keep conquering. I have to keep conquering. I have to keep conquering. Where's the end? There is no end. You're just going to be on the cycle forever. So that's a whole other issue. The good news is, okay, I know how, like you said, I don't necessarily look at it as running towards fear. I look at it for me as just, okay, this is something that I should be doing. It's fearful. I'm going to do it. Obviously, if the house is burning down and there's no one in it, I'm not going to run in. If the house is burning down and there's someone in it and I can run in, I'll do my best, and I'm sure you would as well. But I'm not a fear seeker, just for the heck of it, just for the funsies. If there's something of value there, like achieving a certain goal in climbing or karate or things like that, yeah, I'm going to do it, and then I'll overcome my fear. But the next set for me is, okay, how do I get off that treadmill? Because I don't want to be doing that the rest of my life. Doesn't feel good before every event that I want to achieve to feel fear and anxiety for 1, 2, 3 days, overcome it, feel good for 2 or 3 days, and then go back on and then keep doing that. Any thoughts on that?
You're saying it doesn't feel good to do it every couple of days. Was that your comment?
It doesn't feel good to be propelled, compelled, for me to compel myself to keep overcoming, overcoming, overcoming. It's like there's always going to be something, I had to do a harder climb. I had to always surpass what I'd done the week before. I was always setting myself a higher goal. And together with that came fear and anxiety. And whether I achieved it or not the fear and anxiety went away because I went through the fire, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I think I sometimes wonder if this is a good way to live or not. Like I actually want I've thought about it like net emotional benefit if it is almost if it has an addictive quality or a compulsion behind it, because I do wonder like why do we do that to ourselves? And I get that there's a payoff on the other side of it, that we get to this moment of like I'm glad I did it. What I don't understand and I haven't been able to conquer is why do I resist ever then? Like if I already rationally can understand that there's always a payoff on the other side of the thing that we're pushing ourselves to do, and there is a benefit to constantly trying to escalate, why do I resist it at all? Like, why is it that I still feel the fear in the moment? And so that's
Great.
something that like, and that's the whole like the choice to suffer versus like there's pain, but then there's a choice to suffer. And I know like, you know, what Taoism says, like life is suffering. So like, I'm confused by those two statements too. I
Hmm.
reconcile, well, does life have to be suffering? So I don't
No,
know. Like,
no, it does not have to be suffering. I'll answer that one for you right now. It does not have to be suffering. And that Tao statement is accurate for people that are suffering, but there are people and times when we're not suffering. So, and I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize for that. Sorry. Go ahead. I
no,
got
it's fine.
excited.
It's
I got
again,
excited. Go
and
ahead.
that's, that is something I try to reconcile is, could I, you know, when I try to play out a parallel track, could I just be happy with what is without ever having to push myself again? Like, is that like there's some part of me that fundamentally at a deep level, at a soul level, at some level is clearly saying, like, if you're here, you have to push yourself. And I don't understand the necessary attachment to that, but I do know that I get really restless if I'm not feeling fear, anxiety. Like when things start to get stable, I'm like, oh no, something's wrong. I got to go
Mm,
break something. I have to go push a boundary. I have to go scare the living hell out of myself.
hmm.
And I don't know where that comes from, but again, it is a bit, it sometimes feels like self-torture
It is.
in some ways.
Right. So I'll give you the Buddhist perspective on it, which is that, you know, from childhood, we learned a lot of things from our parents, our culture, our friends, our school. And we set ourselves a lot of expectations, and we'll call them requirements. So, for example, I was required as a little boy to be, you know, let's say quiet, a good student, fair, help others, be on time. I was also learned that maybe I was weak because on occasion I'd get bullied as well. I learned that competition was critical. You had to win, you had to do better. So it's a whole list of requirements that, you know, I just named 5 or 6. There's probably about 30 on my list. You can make a list for yourself as well. Just write it down. That's what I was required to be as a child by my parents, my culture, my teachers, watching TV, my friends, wherever I absorbed it, whether I realized or not, I absorbed that. And maybe one of the things you absorbed was feeling fear is for pussies. Maybe that's what, you know, feeling fear is a sign of weakness. Don't feel fear. That's weak. That's
Yeah.
possibly one of the requirements.
I think it
And
came from something else actually, because I thought about that too. Like, what
okay,
is the origin of it? And there's two things that come to mind, which is one, um, have you read any of Gabor Mate's work?
no, I don't. I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, so Gabor Mate is like one of the leading experts on addiction and harm reduction
Okay.
for people that are addicts. And
Hmm.
again, I'm thinking like, I don't have an addiction and I don't use drugs and I'm not even a drinker. So like, what do I need to read about this for? And fundamentally in his work, what he says is that as children, we are indoctrinated, at least in the West, to trade our authenticity for attachment. So if you are a good boy, I like you. If you're a bad boy, I don't want you. I'm gonna have to
Right.
get rid of you, right? I like so I think that is very much the way we're taught is if you don't behave, you're a bad person, nobody's gonna want you. And so I think I've been trading who I am for the feeling of connection since I was a kid. And what I saw was that that's fear-based. The reason I'm scared I'm going to lose someone, I'm scared I'm going to be rejected. There's all these things that are basically I'm being kept in line by fear. It is fear management. And I think I don't know where this came from, but somehow my very strange mind had solved the puzzle to say, don't let fear control you because you'll never be able to become yourself. And I think that was always the thing is that I've craved authenticity more than anything. I'm like an artist that wants to self-express and share deeply and have those moments of like, you really see me and I really see you. And we both got bullied and now I feel more connected to you, right? Like I crave those moments of breaking down and I guess some people would say like the illusion of separation or individuality. Like I want to feel one and the same with other people. And I think that very early on, I had realized like, yeah, the more I look in the face of fear and challenge it, the more I'm going to be able to find myself.
And I think there's some absolute truth to that, and we've experienced that. But then the question is, do I have to feel fear? Because yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, one might maintain. I'll give you two levels. One might maintain as yeah, the plane's going down, you can feel fear, but there are going to be some people that the plane's going down and they don't feel fear and they just do what they have to do. I'm going to do. Let's see. I want to share my screen with you because I. This is a perfect time. I wasn't planning on this, but I'm
Technology.
technology. Let's see how quickly I can do this. Sorry for the delay here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so let's share screen. There we go. I don't know if you know this guy. Have you seen this picture before?
Is that the guy who free climbs?
Yeah, Alex Honnold.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, he's thousands of feet off the deck. There's no rope. And he's just resting here. He's got to finish the climb. And I don't know if you've done any rock climbing, but it's not like climbing stairs and it's not like being on a ladder.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
being on, things that are a fraction of an inch, that you're holding onto with your fingers and your hands. And just for the heck of it, I'm going to show one more picture of him. If I could find it. Okay, can't find it easily. So anyways, but I'll bring that back. He's not feeling fear. Now, he happens to be an exceptional human being and an exceptional climber, and his brain does work differently from us, from quote unquote normal people. But what he also has done here is he's practiced that route, I don't know how many times. Could be dozens, could be hundreds, could be more, over years. And he's climbed enough routes without a rope that he's known very well. And when you're in that, we'll call it in the zone. When you're in the zone there, you're not feeling fear. You're in the moment. You're in that moment. So, so you don't have to feel fear. That's an option that we have.
That's an interesting question. Does flow state, so if you're in flow state, is fear not an emotion that could coexist inside of flow state?
Correct. What happens is
I never thought of that.
we talk about multitasking. Multitasking is BS.
Yeah.
I can only, I can give you 100% of my attention now. I'm going to take this off because I'd rather look at you than look at Alex. I can give you 100% of my attention now, or, I got my dog barking, as you can hear. I got, let me think about what am I going to do for lunch today. Yeah, I kind of get the gist of what he's talking about. I'm looking at you, but I'm all over the place. Or I can pay 100% attention to you right now. And when I do that, not only do you feel that and you're uplifted, but I feel that and I'm uplifted because I'm in the moment. So when we're climbing, if we feel fear, we're more likely to fall and you can get hurt. If I'm doing karate and I'm facing someone and I blink or I get distracted or I'm sorry. It's my production team in the background. Give me 1 second. I think there was a bird in the back, outside. Very important. They had to get on top of that right away. Am I back on? Can you hear me?
Yep. You're okay.
Okay, great. So, yeah, so you can't do both. So when I lock into the moment, and then everything else is out. When I'm meditating, if I feel fear or anxiety and I start to observe my breath or whatever meditation you do sitting, and I do that for a period of time, the fear is not there, but the bodily sensations still continue. My heart's pounding. I know what I'm feeling. But the mind, if I'm observing my heart pounding or I'm observing my breath, and I'm doing a good job of that, and I get distracted, I come back, I get distracted, I come back, like typical meditation, then that will fade. But the thought of, oh my God, that's not there. What is there is the residual left in the body, which has been a habit. And of course, over time, the more you do that, that starts to fade. But getting back to the causes or the triggers of it is, yeah, when we grew up, we learned, you know, we learned all of these ways to behave and be, which we have now concretized in our mind. Then as an adult, we have a whole other set of things we've taught ourselves. If I go and achieve this goal, I will feel stronger temporarily. And I will think I have overcome my fear, which is true to a large degree. But that's a short-term fix. The longer-term fix is not to feel fear, not to be triggered by that, whether it's fear of failure, fear of not being able to compete, not being a man, whatever it is, only you know what's going on in your mind. And it took me weeks I had 2 lists. This wasn't my idea. It was a Zen master who died a long time ago, wrote about this. One list is all the things we pick up and learn that we require of ourselves as a child, all the things we pick up and learn that we require of ourselves as adults. 2 different lists. Sometimes the things on those lists are competing. So like you could drive yourself crazy because you're not going to be able to meet the requirements if they compete. And when something gets trampled on, we feel anger, fear, irritation, annoyance. And therefore, it's better just to have those lists fade and not be controlled by some requirement that you picked up when you were 6 years old, or some requirement that you picked up when you were 17, 18, 20, 24, 20. Those requirements served you well. It served me well. I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about me. Served me well growing up, and they got me to where I am. And that's wonderful. I don't need them anymore.
Yeah.
But they're a habit. So you got to get rid of it. And habits don't go away like that. Thoughts?
Like you just drop it in my lap. Here you go.
Yeah.
You take it and run with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying to I'm basically trying to overlay what you presented in the lens of what I'm trying to understand, which again, this is obviously for anybody that's listening, this is the first time they're hearing of it. But when we spoke on the phone, I told you a little bit about IFS or internal family systems. And their premise would be that a part of me, an internal part of my personality, can experience the fear, my higher self, not necessarily. So I think in some ways I could say I can unblend from the fearful part, but it doesn't go away. So to your point, it still can live in the body, right? Like the concept of like the body keeps score. So I think that the fear can absolutely, from a physiological perspective, can be happening within my body. I feel the tightness in my stomach. I feel the accelerated heart rate, like you said. But from the state of being, I don't necessarily feel embodied in fear response. And I think that's probably true because I lose sense of time, and I almost feel like once I've lost sense of time, the only emotion I generally fear when time is gone is just joy, elation,
Peace, liberation.
Yeah, calm really overcomes in many ways. So I think that might be true. I've never actually thought about this of when I'm really in my peak state, can I even embody fear if I wanted to? And I'm going to try that next time I am. Like next time I'm in flow, I'm going to do like a body check just to see if I could even come to terms with what's happening in my body when it happens.
What you can do if you want, I don't recommend this for most people that are watching, but you certainly have the experiences. You could start thinking about and focusing on some of the things that can go wrong, or things that you can start to trigger yourself if you want. And those feelings will start, those physical and mental feelings will start to come back. And hopefully you can come out of that slide and stop doing that, because we don't want to live that way. But it's good to check in and say, okay, because, we have all these, I don't want to use the word voices, but we have all these thoughts that are going on. And I was just reading, I knew about it, but I didn't know that it was statistically proven. National Foundation of Science said we think about 12 to 60,000 thoughts every day. Between 12,000 and 60,000. I'd heard the word 60,000 20 years ago. I didn't know where it came from, but I just read about it a couple of weeks ago. So, okay, that's great. That's interesting. No problem. A lot of those thoughts are, what are those thoughts? Those are the shoulda, woulda, coulda. I should have done this. I could do that tomorrow. What's happening? And a lot of those thoughts carry a little bit of a pack the punch, and they're all related to those requirements that we have for ourselves as well. Why did she talk to me that way? I can't believe she would talk to me that way. What should I do for lunch tomorrow? Oh, I'm on a diet. I'm this, whatever it is. The other part of it is 95% of those thoughts are the same from one day to the next. Same
Yeah.
flavor. That's the sad part. That's the habit. So, yeah, I don't want to say fun. It's an interesting exercise when you're in that flow state. If you have enough observant witness power to say, okay, this is where I'm at. Let me trigger myself, my mind about something that's negative and see if I could stay in the flow state. Once again, what I think you'll see is that multitasking is not, you're going to either be here or you're going to be there. But you'll let me know.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm like I said, I'm very curious. And then to your point of, the things that we did as children to what we do as adults and the adaptive strategies. I mean, in a very literal sense, I see it. One of the things I love about running a business is it's probably one of the most spiritual things you can do because man, you're going to be challenging your edges and the amount of times I've wanted to just lay on the floor and go, why is this happening to me? I think it happens a lot in running a business, especially in a really challenging industry. So you end up seeing parts of yourself that you don't necessarily want to face. And if you don't face them, I think life gets even harder. So there is a lot of kind of observing these different patterns that come up. And there's a book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And I think on some level it's, that really is about business practices. And again,
Right,
just the
right,
way
right,
you behave, like
right.
as you grow your different evolutions of the company, it changes, but it's true for us as people too. And I do believe that, as a kid, I went through Landmark. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah,
Landmark.
yeah, yeah, of course, of course.
Right. So Landmark talks about, and I don't remember what their terminology is. It's been a while since I've done it, but they talk about your strong suits. That's what it was.
Okay.
My strong suit. So it's like as a kid, I wanted to, like, again, I grew up in a very stressful family business. Aviation's a stressful business. I saw my parents dealing with a lot of stress and challenges. And so I learned to operate in a very chaotic environment and stay focused where other people go into panic mode. Again, I've been around fear my whole life and I'm kind of like, I could dance in fear in a way most people can't dance in it. Like I almost eat it for lunch, right? Like there's a little
Yeah.
part of me that's like, fear is the indicator of my GPS. Go where the fear is. Um, and that's a strong suit. It means that unfortunately for someone who wants to have like a healthy, loving relationship with me, if there's no fear in the interaction with them, I'm going to be looking for it because I'm a fear chasing machine in many different ways. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right that it's like, okay, now I need to shift gears and go, cool. That really, it may have served me as a child. It doesn't necessarily serve me in healthy adult relationships. Even if it serves me in my business a little bit, then I need to even further silo my life and say, okay, when you're in work mode, then you do leverage that thing from your childhood strong suit. And when you're in a loving relationship, you turn that thing off because I don't need to be inventing reasons for people to be afraid in a loving interaction. And so I think that it's so complex and it's really like that movie Inside Out. Is that what it's called?
I don't know
It's a
that.
Disney movie where there's like internal emotions running around
Oh,
inside running the
really?
machine and controlling
Okay.
the levers.
Okay. Got
Like
it.
I do think it's that on some level where it's like, okay, work is done. Turn off the fear lever for the moment. Stop chasing fear for right now. Let's be in support and care, and let's have ability to just be in serenity and be calm for the night and be like, this was a perfect evening. But no, I'm like, no, I didn't feel any chaos. There was no chaos for me to put into order.
Right. So that's reminiscent of motivation. So, the black and white version of what motivates us. There's goal motivation, which is I want to achieve this. And it's very fearful and anxiety provoking, but I'm going to achieve, I'm going to achieve that. Could be getting to the top of the mountain, could be going to a certain karate tournament, could be, in your case, could be flying a certain way, a certain location, a type of plane under certain conditions, very goal oriented. And when you achieve those things, you feel good. But the feelings that you get are very ephemeral. They come and they go, and then you got to achieve more, and you got to achieve more. But then there's another type of motivation called process oriented. Process oriented means I have a goal. I'd like to get to the top of the mountain or do this type of flight, but I'm going to be very curious, very interested about what's happening right now along the way. What can I learn? That type of motivation. In the first kind of motivation, it's kind of black or white, which is I achieve it or I don't achieve it, yes or no. And it's externally based motivation, and it comes and it goes, and then you feel like you have to do it again. With the process motivation, it's kind of like what that kid, the 10-year-old kid, was saying. It's like, it's not a win or lose. I'm learning. I'm learning. It's not about winning or losing. I'm learning. So So the more you can be in the moment and curious, and that's what's going on when we climb or when you fly, then you don't have that goal orientation. So you're more in the moment. And that's, I think, how one can lead their life instead of where's my next, where am I going to parachute out next? That's more goal oriented.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm assuming you're going to say thoughts.
I'm sorry.
Were you going to drop thoughts on me? I wasn't
Yeah,
sure.
thoughts. Yeah,
Okay, good.
jump in here. Interrupt.
I'm
No
learning your
problem.
style.
Oh
I'm learning
yeah.
how you roll. So, um, yeah, I guess I definitely have been more goal oriented most of my life. I mean, again, unfortunately, that's how schooling works. Schooling is like you're keeping score. Everything is score, whether you're in sports or whether you're in school, like, or, in a history class, like, hey, we're going to grade you on a test. Doesn't matter how you got here. It doesn't even matter what you actually learned. It only matters how good you got on the score. So I've absolutely been winning at scores most of my life. I have very impressive, things that don't matter. Like who cares what my report card was in high school, but man, it was good at the time and didn't mean anything now. So I think that shifting to that process, and it's so trite when I hate to admit that all the things I've been told, it's the journey, it's not the destination. I'm like, yeah, it sounds like a Disney movie, but in reality, it's kind of true. It's like it
Yeah.
really is the journey. It's the process. It's the who cares where you end up, because that's not guaranteed. But what is guaranteed is, where are you now? Are you creating the conditions that might create that outcome sustainably? Are you creating those conditions in a way that's not self-abuse and instead is self-love? That's another really interesting thing. It's like some people are successful because they hate themselves. Other people are successful because they love themselves. How do I make sure that my process is love-driven, not fear or hate-driven? And that's, I definitely agree that that's an important shift that I don't think many people live in, process orientation.
Yeah. No, very well said. And in fact, what I did for maybe 2 or 3 years, I just stopped climbing cold. I didn't like what I was doing to myself. I didn't really understand it, but I knew it was bad. I was on a treadmill, and it was either gonna keep going on and on, or I was gonna die because I kept on pushing the envelope, which I think comes from flight technology. That phrase, but that's another story. And then after a few years, I said to myself, I had a meeting with myself, and I said to myself, let me do something that I like doing, because I also noticed that without the climbing, I still had all this energy, kind of like you. I got to do something with that energy. It wasn't really fear, but I had to get it out. And yoga, even though I do it every day, almost every day, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me to get all that excess energy out. So I said, I went back to climbing, but I said, I'm only going to do this though if I enjoy it. And I wasn't going to pay attention to there's different grades in climbing to achieve. And I'm not going to pay attention to any of the grades. I'm just going to climb to see if I enjoy it. And that shifted for me, and I enjoy it. And I go now. I don't have to go every day. I don't have to go every week like I used to on a schedule. I don't have to achieve certain things. I do it because I enjoy it. When I stop enjoying it, I'll stop doing it. And that gets all that physical stress out, and allows me to be in the moment and allows me not to be on that treadmill. So, anyways, we really took some wrong turns, or some left turns here. But so I'm going to get back to the third. I have 17 pages of notes. I'm now on the third line, by the way, of the first page.
Fantastic. That's how you're doing a good podcast.
So I watched, very much enjoyed when you talked about the pilot mindset, and you mentioned it earlier, 10, 15 minutes ago. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I can paraphrase, but I'd rather hear it from you in terms of how you view the pilot mindset, because it's very much like what we're talking about now in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, once again, I think that you could look at what is and you could create no meaning out of it, or you could look at what is and create a ton of meaning around it. So for me, I look at all the things that I've inherited in my life, and I'll actually go to a particular story. So I was flying a single engine airplane and the engine quit, and we ended up gliding the airplane to an Air Force base. And what was notable was, during the experience, I noticed that I never at any moment looked to the sky and swung my arms and said, woe is me. How could this have happened? I don't deserve this. There was never arguing with any of reality in that moment. I was like, oh, engine quit, execute on emergency landing procedure. And it was no fear. I really, like, you talk about, like, do you have fear or not? I didn't have any fear because I was like, well, I'm on a rail at this point. Like, I don't have a lot of choices. I'm going to follow the rail to the ground and do my best. And whatever happens, happens. At the same time, I was in a challenging romantic relationship. And I noticed that I would be like, why is this happening? I don't understand. Like, I don't deserve this. And it was just all this like unhealthy relationship to wishing things were other than what they actually are. And so I was like, how is it that I'm two different people? When I'm in that seat, I just see the world differently. When I'm out of that seat, I'm just struggling to navigate the variability of things happening around me. So it was then that I started to distill it down and go, what am I doing in the cockpit? What are my belief systems? And I realized that the flight training for me had become a boot camp for teaching a mindset for moving through life with high intention. So everything from, like, I would never take off without having a destination in mind. That's step one for me. Is how many of us live a life with no end goal? Like, I don't know. I just want to have like a good one. What does that even mean? Like, I want to have a good flight. Well, where are you going? Like, it's the same thing. So I think it's more of like, all right, well, let me make sure when I'm intentional, I start with the destination in mind. And that means sometimes just sitting on it, meditating on it. Where do I want to go? What do I really want to do today? Because flying to fly is nice, but still, is the destination to be back here? Then I'll take off to a circle and land here. But I never would take off without knowing. Step two was, okay, well, if that's true, what are my capabilities? And what is the capability of the machinery? So if I want to fly 1 million pounds of cargo, I probably can't do it in my small plane. Well, same thing. If I want to make $1 million, do I even have the skills to do that? Do I have the required structure, or have I set my life up in a way that realistically this could be an outcome? Have I studied other people? Again, like, planes come with manuals. This is what it can do. This is what it can't do. I should probably make a manual of me. Here's what I do know. Here's what I don't know. I don't know finance, and I want to make $1 million. I better learn something about accounting and finance. Something, right? Like, or let me learn tax optimization. So I was like, let me get really clear with kind of a self check-in, and then figure out a skills gap. And then step three is like, okay, now I've kind of understood the machinery. Let me create my flight plan. My flight plan is going to be, I'm at A and I want to get to that point B, but in an airplane, I work around weather and mountains and other hazards and risks. In real life, I just draw a straight line and wonder why I smack into a tree. And I'm like, yeah, I was just hopeful. I didn't even think about what could go wrong. So that's, the third thing was have that flight plan. And then at some point I got to get on the runway and just start going and commit. I need to hit a certain speed before I can maneuver, before I could turn left, turn right, go up, go down. And in life, I'm like so busy running in 94 different directions. I'm like, the plane would never get off the ground if I didn't commit energy in one direction for some amount of time. So it's, get moving. Once you're in the air, follow your flight plan. And I always say, make small adjustments. Like, have your critical instruments designed. Right in front of me is 6 instruments that if I stare at those things, and they're in a tiny little box of about, let me see, I guess that would be about 12 inches by 8 inches. Everything I need to know if everything went to hell is in that box. And I just watch those instruments and I make small adjustments based on my critical information. Life's the same way. What matters to you? If you care about your weight, measure your weight. If you care about the quality of relationships, come up with a metric. How often do you look at that metric? Once a week, once a day? I wake up next to someone. I ask them, how are we doing today? Do you feel connected? Are you happy? Your happiness is my critical metric. Like, whatever that is, like, define your critical numbers, monitor them, small, tiny adjustments as you go. And, I think that's really kind of been the whole system for me, is be really intentional with what that is, plot your course, make your tiny adjustments. And again, I was so curious why I didn't apply that to other parts of my life. And I created a little worksheet for myself where I measure, my physical health, my mental health, my intellectual health, my spiritual health, how I'm showing up in my community, my wealth, my career, my family. And I just check those things from time to time and say, like, how's the oil level? How are we doing? Do we have enough gas in the tank? Is everything feeling good? And it's just allowed me to be much more intentional. And again, it's flying to me has become very much a spiritual quest of understanding how to live with intention. I mean, it's also a beautiful thing to look down on the world and see the fractal patterns and, have a relationship to, people talk about relationship to nature. Try flying through it when it's surprising you with a thunderstorm you didn't expect to see. Really being humble. Like, technology humbles people. A storm system that throws hail balls at your airplane really, really humbles you, where you're like, man, I am just going for the ride. At some point, I'm just going for the ride. And if I get too confident and too cocky, the world is going to show me a real hard lesson. And I think that there's a lot of beauty in that. So I've showed some people the methodology. I've taught the methodology from time to time, but it's something I've come to great fortune of. What a lucky guy I am to have grown up around aviation and to be able to see that, and then to be able to then apply it to other parts of my life.
Yeah, the analogies are magnificent, and I appreciate you going through that, because I definitely can see how that can flow out into the when you're not in the cockpit, how one can lead their life and be productive and happy and healthy and all that. So that's a great mindset, pilot mindset. The way you describe it is great, and I love that. Have you ever seen the movie Fearless? It's 20, 30 years old. If you haven't, I
Who was
recommend that
in
you
that?
rent it. It's about a guy, I want to say Jeff Bridges, and there's an airplane crash, and he and I think one or two other people live, and just his experience while the plane's going down. It's not going to ruin the movie for you or anyone else, but
Was it in Alaska and they have like wolves and they're in the snow?
that's a different movie. This one, he's just super calm. Everyone around him, as you can imagine, is totally freaking out, but he goes into another world in his mind, and just super calm. And then anyway, so I recommend it. I think I tried looking for it the other day. I didn't find it, but anyways, Fearless. Recommend it highly. The other thing you mentioned is difficult relationships. What's different about flying and achieving the level of expertise that you've achieved is that's primarily between you and yourself, and of course the plane and the weather and all these other myriad of factors for sure. But then you throw a person into your equation of your life. It's like a woman or a parent or or a colleague or a customer, whatever, and all of a sudden they have a whole different set of rules and different expectations. So what I notice is that when I get annoyed, irritated from a difficult interaction, could be with any other person or thing, I check and I see, okay, where's the rub? What expectation or requirement of mine is not being met by that person? Oh, they're not treating me fairly. Oh, they called me a name. Oh, they insulted me. I, how could they talk to me about? So there's something on my call it list of expectations of, one of my expectations, one of my requirements was always treat others fairly. Always show people respect. But I hold on to that. You can tell if a requirement of yours is getting trampled on, and how important that attachment is, by how angry or annoyed or irritated you get. So if you get very angry, very annoyed, very irritated, you know that that's a really important attachment that you have to whatever that requirement is on your list. So, anyways, I don't know where that came from. Um,
You're guided.
okay. I watched a video of you with Ben Glebe, comedian. Is that how
Yeah.
you pronounce his name?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And there was one quote that struck me. You asked him a question about, maybe he asked you about what motivates you. You asked him what motivates him. And he said here, well, when you're laughing, you're totally at peace. You can't be stressed out about your worries the moment you're laughing. And it's nice to bring that to people. Does that sound familiar? Do you remember him saying that, or you had a
I mean,
look?
I don't remember the exact comment, but I understand the premise.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, wow, that's right on. That's kind of like what you and I were talking about before. And it's true. When you're laughing at something, it's such I don't want to call it extreme, but you're truly in the moment. In some ways, laughter is an extreme. Uh, you can't be all these other places in your mind. So I found that interesting, and I found that he likes to bring that to people as well.
Yeah, it's one of the I hold stand-up comedians in one of the highest of regards. I do think it's, a lot of people talk about the cosmic joke. You might have heard that comment. And
No,
and I do think that there's a certain point when you look at the ridiculousness of the nature of everything around us, you almost just have to laugh at it. And I really appreciate that comedians will take the things that are the scariest. I mean, the whole equation of comedy equals tragedy plus time. Yeah, I think
right?
there's something to be said for that. It's something that, and it's I don't know why I had this profound realization. Like if you take that and create an inverse on it, it's ultimately then laughing is really just crying given the grace of time.
Very interesting. Yeah, no, I agree with that. But you mentioned something before about you have great respect for comedians. Now that I'm thinking about it, you're absolutely right. I mean, they make things look easy. They make us laugh. Maybe we even minimize, oh, he's a comedian. What does he know? But the fact of the matter is, when these people go up on stage, they are dealing with the all of their fears in a big way. I could be humiliated. They could laugh at me. I could be a failure. you know,
Yeah.
these things when you're on stage can't be clearer than that. And yet they go up on stage and they have to, in the face of fear, the fear of their ego being crushed. And that's really what gets us, angry and irritated and annoyed. So I agree. That's really, a lot of respect for them
They
in
also
that
can teach
regard.
us a lot about meditation and being present, because I think that they move through life and they will literally take their notes out. Like you and I had an issue with getting the Zoom meeting started. They would literally take out things and be like, I'm going to make a note about that and find the absurdity in it. We just
Right,
accept life the way it is in many cases.
right.
These guys and girls are looking constantly. They're like, what else happened today that's ridiculous that we just take for granted? And I think that that's really a beautiful, beautiful way to look at life is I take nothing as it is. I'm going to challenge everything to see, why do we do that? Isn't that crazy that we do that? So there is something to be said for that as well. Is that the ones that are the best, I think, do have this profound way of moving through the world and seeing it through different eyes, almost through like a newborn's eyes,
Hmm.
with the why do we do that again?
Right,
And the
right.
other thing that they do, when I think the best comedians are the ones that stop trying to say what they think people want to hear and they just start showing us who they really are. And that is exposing, to get up in front of people and say, I know I'm supposed to want to please all of you people. And a lot of them do. But there are some that go up there and say, I'm not here to please you. Actually, I'm here to show you who I am. And that's like the Dave Chappelle's of the world. Those are
Right. I
the
was just
guys
going
that
to
are
say that.
like
Yep.
it just comes through them. They have
Right.
something they feel like they need to say. And we really do feel connected to them because we're like, wow, I feel like I know you better than I know some of my family members because they don't speak to me that authentically. It's
Yep.
incredible. It's
Yeah.
really a beautiful thing.
I think I agree with you 100%. And I think Dave Chappelle, that's the name that came to my mind when you said that as well. Um, yeah. I mean, because now they're taking off the mask as well. A lot of people just leave the mask on and they do their routine. There's nothing wrong with that, but they take off the mask. Like, this is who I am and this is what I really did experience. Um, and the other thing is, you go see a comedian, 45 minutes, an hour and a half, which is a tough, long set as far as, I know from, what public speaking I've done. And you come out and you feel better, not just because you've laughed. That's definitely part of it. Of course, you're laughing, but also because you were in the moment for that 69. You weren't busy thinking about other stuff. You were literally focused, observing in the moment. And the same is true with fear. If you can stay in the moment, observe what you're experiencing, be curious. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of practice. Then, most people, what do they do with fear? Ignore it, repress, crawl up in a ball, run away. And sometimes you might have to do that if the fear is extreme or
Yeah.
God forbid, I interviewed someone who lost their son, suicide. Okay, you know what? Sometimes you do have to get into bed and crawl up, and sometimes you have to recover that way. So, what I recommend people do when they want to try to address these issues, we'll call it issue of fear, is start with small things. Always start with small. Uh, Person I interviewed, Arno Illner, he's a coach to some of the top rock climbers in the world. And what is he? One of the many things he does with them is to try to get them over their fear of falling. And he does this with average climbers as well. And how do you do that? Well, you start by putting them on a rope and they climb 6 inches, you're a few feet off the ground, and then they let them fall 6 inches. This is 6 inches, right? That's it. Not a big deal. Anyone can do that. But then, and they do that a bunch of times, and I'm going to oversimplify what he does. But then they fall 8 inches, 10 inches, 12 inches, and this could be taken over the course of days until finally, by the end of the classes that he's taught, and I'm sure he works with people for weeks or months on end, not just a 2-day class. People are falling, and I've done this 20, 30 feet. And what you're trained to do is while you're falling, pay attention. And there's certain physical things you have to do with your body as well. You can't just fall like this, bang your head. You have to fall in a like a cat's type of motion. But the two parts are A, start off really, really small. And then B, pay attention, be in the moment, be curious. Because when you first start, like when I first started climbing and I would fall, I didn't remember what happened. It's almost like you black out.
Yeah.
Your eyes are open. Maybe some people close their eyes, but you couldn't pay attention.
Yeah. You went into shock.
You went into shock. Exactly. Guess what you learn when you do that? Zero.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. I've heard that about skydiving. A lot of people don't remember their first jump.
Exactly. So it's incremental steps to overcome something, and pay attention. Because pay attention gets back to that process orientation instead of, oh, I'm going to climb to the top and I'm going to take that fall, and then you black out, you don't remember anything, but I did it. You feel better. You feel relief. You're not anxious anymore, but then you're on that treadmill.
Yeah.
So, my teacher says, the past is history, the future is mystery, the present moment is a gift. I say that to myself only 17,000 times a day. When I find myself, I'm joking, when I find myself thinking about something a year from now, and oh my God, if that happens, like, whoa, hold up. So anyways, I know you're a student of IFS. We talked about that, internal family systems. Can you share with us, what that is for people that don't know, what you're studying, and what you like about it, and how you found that's helped you?
Sure. And just a quick time check
Yeah.
as well. I know for whatever reason, this conversation is going way faster than it should. I feel like
Okay.
I'm in flow. I've lost all sense of
Okay.
time. But so IFS for me is something that when I was introduced to it, I didn't really pay attention to what it was. And I ended up watching YouTube videos about it. And it was immediately like, this makes sense. This just works. So the premise of IFS is that if you've ever felt conflicted, you feel like part of you wants one thing and another part of you wants another thing, or you sometimes act out in a way that you're like, why did I do that after the fact? You're like mad at yourself for what you did. You're like, I don't know why I act out in that way, or I react negatively, or I'm triggered by this thing. The premise is that we have internal parts. We literally have an internal family system inside of us. I really connect with it because it allows me to kind of position myself as my higher thinking self, like the capital S self, is the CEO of a bunch of internal component personalities.
Got it.
And when something happens, I actually can allow all the feelings to come through. So, hey, part of me is afraid, part of me is excited, part of me wants to burn the house down, part of me wants to come from love. And then the higher part is the curious self. It's the curious, creative, compassionate part that's like, hey, I get it. Like, you're afraid because you're a young part. You're a part that was the adaptive part that tried to deal with anxiety and fear as a kid and watched a kid get bullied and then came out and said, I'm never going to let you get bullied again. I'm never going to connect with people, or I'm going to distance from people, or I'm going to keep you away from people. So like social anxiety may be a part of me that is trying to protect my more emotional self from being in those situations of feeling unsafe. And so it's the higher self can start to look at that and go, oh, interesting. I'm blended with all these different parts of me. And I'm not choosing from the place of the higher self. I'm choosing from the place of a component part that may be running an old program. That's what you're talking about, old habits, right? So there's some old program here. And the really beautiful thing about the work is the more I've done internal work, the more I see my internal world change. My external world change. And at first I was like, yeah, this is just inside, but like what is it called? Non-duality. You start to realize that the inner world and the outer world are kind of the same thing. So my child part is literally the way I relate to that is the way I relate to my nephew or my niece. Or, I see the inner child in my father, who's like this lovely, creative guy who can solve any problem and fix anything. And he plays with toys for a living. He flies airplanes. Like, when I'm really getting clear, he's someone that plays with toys. He built a business around playing with toys. And so like his inner child part really feels gratification from like, I like to play with the toy. And to see that and see the beauty in it and appreciate, like, that's my inner child part too. I also like to play with toys, but I don't allow myself to feel that. And I don't necessarily connect on that. And now to see everyone else's internal systems start to come to light and go, oh, interesting. I'm triggering that person's inner child, but their higher self really sees benefit in having me in their life or as
Mhm.
meaningful connection. So it's just been an incredible roadmap for self-awareness and for how to show up and come from love more often. I think that's really what it's been for me is how, like I ask myself that question constantly. How do I live for more love in my life? And IFS was the thing that gave me the path to get there. The other thing I love about it is there's a guy, Jay Early, who wrote a book called Self Therapy. And it's like, hey, $20, read the book. You could just do it for yourself. You don't have to use a facilitator. This isn't something that requires thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of investment. You can learn to do it pretty simply. There's no big magic about it. It's so just commonsensical when you do it. And yeah, it's one of those things that I learned at 40. And I'm like, man, if I learned this as a teenager, my life would be so fundamentally different. And that's fine. No point in regretting or going back. What I think about it though is let me make sure that I tell other people about it so that they don't have to ever live with that thought as well of like, wow, I wish I found this out 20 years sooner.
Yeah, no, beautifully said. And I appreciate that. The parts that come through for me from what you said and from what I've read is the sense of compassion that we can have for ourselves. We can beat ourselves up and then we can overcome that because of some habit or trigger from the past and some requirement we've set up, or we can just have compassion for ourselves and say, yeah, this is how I feel. I don't have to feel, almost talk to ourselves like we're a child, because that's kind of what we need. That's what we would
I
talk.
100% believe in inner child work.
Yeah, that's
I think many of us need to be reparented in many different ways.
yeah. I mean, if a friend or a loved one, adult or child, was feeling that way, that's how I would talk to them. Even if it's an adult, it's like with softness, with compassion, with love, child or adult. So why can't we talk to ourselves that way or treat ourselves that way? So that's kind of what came through. So and I appreciate you want to share this knowledge with others. I love that. That's frankly why I'm doing the podcast, not because I get paid $1 million per episode. Um, I didn't mention that, did I? Before, anyways. So do you want to do this like as a therapist? Do you want to do this as a coach, or do you just find it just very gratifying for
Right
your
now,
self
it's
growth?
just something that I guess I less worry about what to do with it and more that I just want to understand it. So that's generally how I've been approaching things is stay in the curiosity. Don't turn it into a business model. Don't turn it into my living. Because that's my initial inclination is
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
I wonder
yeah,
how much
yeah,
IFS therapists make and how big the
yeah.
market is in New
Absolutely.
York.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, who cares? Stop it. So I was like, I make a living. Everything's fine. I don't need to chase more professional opportunity. What I see it as is let me stay in curiosity. Let me truly understand what this means to me. Let me see how I can help the people I care about in my life. And look, if at some point it becomes an opportunity to do something, so be it. And with that, I will tell you that I'm adding one other thing to the list of things I'm pursuing is I think I'm going to be signing up for a sound meditation class where it's like 8 or 9 days of learning how to use different instrumentation for healing or for, again, like calming or just to facilitate meditation in general. I obviously believe in the power of music as a musician.
That's right.
And my whole life, I've been playing music to make people happy. I do love it. It's something that like when I play music, I'm a different person. I definitely end up in the higher self and in flow. I could talk to anybody. I'm very powerful. And I noticed that, I play music in the parks in New York and I just love the joy it brings to people. So the idea of saying now I can not only bring people joy, but what if I can actually help people heal in some way? And that feels deeply, deeply important to me to be able to say, okay, well, IFS gives me a framework to understand other people and have compassion and be able to have powerful conversations and help them know themselves in the same way I can help myself know myself. Um, then to add on top of that, the music as a healing tool to me, I'm like, I think that's what I'm interested in right now at the age of 40 is like, I want to work those two mediums. I have no idea what to do with them other than it just feels really important to me.
Wow, that is so exciting. I agree. I mean, when you said it, in my mind, it was like, wow, a big click because we didn't really get a chance to talk about it. But you're a professional. I don't know if you're a professional. You're a great musician. Professional, I think, implies you make money from it. I don't know about that. Maybe you do. But you're a great musician. I listened to a number of your songs. Um, and so, absolutely. And to combine that and what it means to you, to combine that with this healing modality and this sense of compassion or love and maybe helping others. Wow. It's like, and who cares where it takes you? You just know that feels right now. And who knows what door will open or not. So I wish you much luck with, not luck, but I think you're gonna have a blast with it. So
Yeah.
great for you.
It feels
Okay.
different. And I'm glad you asked the question of like, what do I want to do with it? Because the old me would be like goal oriented,
Right.
go, go, go.
Right. I got to change that. That was my mistake. I should not have asked that question.
No,
That's
no,
a
it's a great,
very
but I
goal
actually
oriented
think
question.
it's a great question because I actually think it pressure tests someone's motivations. Why do you do what you do? Right? Like it's an important question. And I think that's why I know this is right for me because I don't, if someone said to me, what if you never made $1 at either of these things? Yeah. Okay. I still want to learn it.
Right.
I win as just by the act of learning it. I get more value out of this than anything I could ever imagine in the future. So I don't care. Like I don't need any incentive. And that to me is, again, I'm proud of myself because I'm going, now I'm in process. Now I'm
Process
really doing
oriented.
this for the right
Beautiful.
reason.
Process motivation. Great. Okay. Coming down to the last question of the day. Who are your heroes? Could be someone alive, dead, close to you, fame. It doesn't really matter. One or two. Anyone come to mind?
Um, Man, well, we just went through Mother's Day. So I think it's tough. I mean, there's people that I look to from a distance, and I would say that historically I've probably called them heroes. And I think I may retract that statement of I don't know them and I don't know the color that they brought to the people that were close to them. So I now would say, and I know this is a long answer to the question, I'm more interested in what people meant to the people close to them. I think that's really the measure that I'm looking at. So, I love the fact that there's people like the Elon Musks of the world that are doing all these really cool things and get to Mars and like so many cool inventions coming from him. And, Nikola Tesla is an interesting guy and he did all these great things. But, really to me, when I look back at my real definition of heroes is the people that have been in my life and showed me extraordinary love and belief in me at a time when I couldn't see it for myself. So I have a whole list of people that come to mind, and I won't tell you all of them, but one of them, I think I'm going to have to start with my parents, as trite as that is. My mom, I really couldn't understand what was going on for her because I didn't have the compassion for how hard it must have been to be her. And I recently, through a meditation, had this complete awareness of, as a 19-year-old, she had her first kid, had 3 more kids within 8 years of that, raised us out of the house while running my dad's business out of a walk-in closet. And, I just look at this person who has committed their entire life to taking care of her family and never really asked for any credit. Not an ounce, not a single ounce of like, I did that. And I think I've been really good about taking a lot of the credit. My dad too, we're really good about being like, we did this.
Right.
But in reality, she never even cared. She never even cared to correct us. And she was like, well, whatever, take the credit. Good for you. I'm happy for you. And so I look at that and I go, man, that is just unbelievable. And to not be appreciated until maybe now, like I think I've been difficult to her and been like, oh, you don't treat me the way I want to be treated, or like I wish you thought this way, or I wish you gave me a better business to inherit, or like I just think of like all the dumb stuff that I've said that was just no gratitude or appreciation for how hard her circumstance has been, and yet she never held it against me. And so I think that, and again, I don't know what I believe about the word God or source or universe or any of that stuff or what anybody else believes, but I think that my mother's love for me is about as close to God's love as I can imagine. To really experience that and sit in it and go, why have I been resisting this my whole life? And I'm just really grateful for her that she spent 40 years continuing to operate from that place of unconditional source love, hoping that someday I'd finally understand. It's amazing. And I think, my dad is just this, like, I almost, I see people sometimes as animals, and not in a bad way. I just see my dad as like this, like, ingenious monkey who like takes the stick and gets the ants out of the bark. And, and it's like, here he is, he can solve any problem. And as a kid, he would tell me, if you don't understand something, take it apart and put it back together again. Literally radios, cars, anything. And his whole thing about the world was, it's not that complicated because someone built it in the first place. None of it's that complicated. So just figure it out, take it apart. You'll solve it. You break it, you fix it, whatever it ends up being. You ultimately learn something in the process, and you kind of just see a deeper, like you start to learn your own confidence, and I could solve problems I've never seen before. And that's what my dad is in many ways. He's the guy that can solve a problem he's never seen before. And I watched him do it many, many, many times. In fact, one time we landed on a runway and they incorrectly reported on that runway that there was good braking conditions and it was iced over. So here we are sliding down the runway. There's a whole family of people on the airplane that owned that plane. My dad was their hired pilot. And I'm sitting all the way in the back watching. And I realized, and I'm like 13, I'm like, oh man, we're not going to stop. And there's a cliff at the end of the runway. And I was like, wow, I'm afraid and I'm curious what he's going to do. And what he did, he got to the end of the runway and it was a twin engine airplane and it doesn't have reversing props like you might've been in some airplanes. Right. It doesn't have thrust reversers. So what he did was he pushed one throttle up, spun the airplane 180 degrees and then threw the other throttle up and then threw both throttles and spun the airplane around and stopped it backwards. And I was like, I've asked him this many times, how did you know to do that? And he's like, I heard about it once. And I was like in the middle of this like crazy moment of overstimulus, thinking that you could die or get injured or something could go totally wrong or your reputation could be ruined. It's like your mind was able to index the one time you heard about this thing, maybe years and years and years ago. It was able to go, there it is. There's the book I need to reference to be able to pull up the exact experience I need to solve this problem. I'm like, that's phenomenal. So one, I give my dad a lot of credit and I'm also just blown away by the brain. It's like, here's this guy who operates on such a high level. And I don't know, I find that to be in many ways, I'm like, that was one of the greatest gifts he ever gave me was, if you don't know how to do it, figure it out. It's all solvable. Don't ever not do it because you're afraid you won't be able to solve the puzzle.
Yeah, I don't, I have a lot to say about all of that, but I want to, but I don't want to dilute any of that because I just think it's beautiful. It's inspiring. Both your parents gave you, God-given gifts, and it's up to you now to take them, and which you're doing. So I'm sure we'll talk more about those. I have a lot of thoughts and questions and all great stuff, but I also know we're running out of time. So you got to come back tomorrow, and we'll talk more. Anyways, Nick Tarascio, the CEO of Ventura Air. Thank you so much for joining me, and it was great meeting you. And I look forward to staying in touch.
Absolutely. It's great to be on.
Okay. Be well. Stay safe.
Take care.
I hope you enjoyed our talk with Nick Tarascio. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the It's Not What You Think podcast. That really helps us to continue to produce these episodes and invite other guests from around the world. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or would like to hear any specific guests on the podcast, please share my email, mordylevine@gmail.com, or visit mordylevine.com. Remember, it's not what you think.